Twitch's death wasn't random. His final recording was aimed at Ellen DeGeneres. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison Trent took his seat. The year was 2025. It was a pivotal moment in Los Angeles. A hush followed his words. "We begin with a minute of silence," he said, voice steady. Cameras panned. Everyone stood. They honored Stephen Twitch Boss, a talented dancer, a dedicated father. They remembered him with reverence. He died too soon. His 16-year-old daughter Wesley, 8-year-old son Maddox, and 5-year-old Zaya sat nearby. Tears stained Allison Holker's face, Twitch's grieving wife. Her hand clutched a photograph. That image defined the trial. At the prosecution table, Kash Patel leaned forward. His role was clear. He was the special prosecutor. His mission expose truth. He wore a dark suit. His eyes burned with purpose. The room felt his authority. Ellen DeGeneres, famous TV host, looked calm. Too calm. She sat beside her lawyer. He prepared to argue Twitch's death was suicide or drug-related. He would deny every accusation. But for now, silence stretched between them. The camera captured Diddy, seated at the defense table. His expression was guarded. He had his own charges. But here Ellen was in the spotlight. Kash Patel stood. He crossed to the jury box. He faced them directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here to expose a hidden system, a system that destroyed Stephen Boss's life and abused his memory after death." He paused. The jury listened. The audience leaned forward. Mr. Boss trusted those he called family, but they betrayed him. They exploited him. They used his talent and his soul for their gain. He gestured toward Ellen. "Ms. DeGeneres," he said quietly, "you were his recruiter, his guide into that inner circle. You ushered him in. You helped keep him silent." A murmur rose. Ellen's lawyer made a note. Allison gasped. Kash continued. "He left messages, audio recordings, emails, hotel logs. All show she was there. She took part." He turned to Allison. "The threats you endured, the pressure to stay silent, that's part of their system." Allison nodded. Her voice trembled as she added, "They told me, speak, and your children will suffer." Justice tightened. Judge Trent tapped his gavel. "Let us proceed." Kash pulled out a binder. "First exhibit a voice memo." He handed it to the clerk. This was recorded by Twitch, weeks before his death. The clerk played it softly. The courtroom quieted. Twitch's voice cracked. He said, "They say I came in at midnight. They have rules. They tell me to smile. They say it's family. But I feel trapped." It ended with a sigh. Jury faces hardened. Diddy glanced at Ellen. Kash pressed on. Next, surveillance stills. 4 images appeared on the screen. Ellen, Twitch, Diddy together at a private event. Flashing lights made them all look uneasy. "She wasn't a bystander," Kash said. "She recruited. She watched. She encouraged." Ellen's lawyer stood. "Objection, speculation." Judge Trent replied, "Just keep it grounded in facts, counselor." Ellen's lawyer nodded and sat. Kash paused for effect. "These photos are from 2019 and 2021. Private jet security crews, biometric gates, no phones allowed. It was ritual, systematic, and dangerous." He glanced at Allison. Another shard of pain showed. Then Kash closed his binder. "Your Honor, jury, this is more than a case. It's a reckoning." He returned to his seat. Judge Trent leaned in. "Prosecution, call your first witness." Allison rose slowly. She gripped the witness stand. Her voice was firm. "I saw my husband change," she said. "He was excited, but every time he left, he came back haunted." She described the events, the parties, the demands, the threats. Ellen watched impassively. Outside whispers buzzed. "This is bigger than Diddy." Inside the trial was unfolding. Allison's testimony stunned the room. Her words sliced through the courtroom's cold air. "They told me if I spoke, my children wouldn't be safe," she repeated. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't need to. The silence was its own echo. Kash Patel rose again. "Can you name the individual who said this?" Allison didn't hesitate. "Ellen DeGeneres." A gasp broke from the gallery. Allison continued. "She said my husband needed to play the part, that no one would believe him if he broke down, that they would make it look like an accident." She wiped her cheek, and they did. Kash turned to the screen. Another audio file played. This time Twitch's voice was faint. "They said I'd disappear. They said nobody would believe me. I wanted to protect my kids. I stayed. I smiled." Judge Trent's face was stern. He glanced at Ellen, then back to Allison. Kash moved swiftly. "Let's address the timeline." A digital calendar appeared. December 2021. Ellen and Twitch flew to L.A. Private flight. No record of destination. Hotel booked under an LLC. Same day Diddy hosted an event. Same building, same floor. Then April 2022, same pattern. Different city, same names. He turned to the jury. "Coincidence doesn't leave a paper trail." Ellen's lawyer objected again. "Circumstantial," Kash countered. "Patterns aren't circumstantial when they form a system." The judge allowed it. Then came the shock. A forensic expert took the stand. He held up a tablet. "This device contained a deleted voicemail," he explained. "It was recovered from a work phone tied to Twitch. Message dated 3 days before his death." The courtroom held its breath. The recording played. Twitch's voice was raw. "If you're hearing this, they got to me. But don't believe it. I didn't give up. I was tired of pretending, tired of being hurt." A pause. "And tell my wife, tell my kids, I did it all to keep them safe." Allison sobbed quietly. Outside news networks picked it up in real time. Headlines flashed. Twitch's final words revealed dark truth. Back in court, Kash addressed the jury. "This is not suicide," he said. "This is coercion. This is exploitation." He continued showing records of cash transfers. 2 weeks after his death, Allison received $3.22 million. Source: an anonymous entertainment trust. "We traced it back, Ellen's corporate entity, same shell company that booked hotel rooms. Coincidence or cover-up?" Ellen's lawyer stood, voice rising. "It was a legacy disbursement, standard estate processing." But Kash was ready. Then why was it marked operational silence compensation? The jury reacted. Next came the bombshell testimony. A former producer from The Ellen Show. Anonymous. Voice distorted. Twitch tried to speak once, the voice said. He was cut mid-broadcast. They called it low energy. But I saw his eyes. Something was wrong. The producer spoke of warnings, of whispered threats. "Don't ask about Diddy. Don't ask about parties. Don't even mention after hours." Screenshots of internal emails flashed. Phrases like "shut it down, media containment light shift initiated." Kash pointed. This wasn't just bad behavior. It was infrastructure. Then came more evidence. Metadata from Twitch's third unreleased audio file, titled "If They Say I Quit." The contents remained sealed, but 2 lines leaked. "I love my family. I love dancing. But they'll say I quit. That's the part that hurts most." Kash addressed the court. They broke him. Then they blamed him. The judge declared a recess. Reporters scrambled. Public pressure mounted. The next day, Kash submitted new documents. Private memos, emails, code words. Light shift meant grooming. Stillness weekend was isolation. Twitch appeared over 70 times, mostly in logistics files, not entertainment. A final witness took the stand, a therapist, not Twitch's, but one employed by the studio. She admitted the role wasn't therapeutic. "We were hired to monitor," she said, "to assess emotional risk, and report it, not treat it." She paused. Twitch was flagged as medium risk after saying, "Sometimes the smile feels like a cage." The courtroom froze. He was scheduled for a forced break. He never returned. Outside, the world began to understand. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a takedown. And the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. Twitch was never broken. He was exhausted from fighting alone. The courtroom reconvened, hushed and heavy. The jury's faces were intent. Kash Patel stood at the prosecutor's podium, eyes trained on Ellen's counsel. Your client contends this was a tragic suicide, yet our evidence paints a different picture. He clicked a remote. A large image appeared. A ledger displaying $8.4 million in unexplained reimbursements. These funds traced to shell companies tied to Ellen's production entity, he asserted. Funds labeled Midnight Logistics and Event Hush. Ellen's lawyer interjected, "These are standard event costs." Kash responded firmly, then explained the timing payments arrived days after Twitch's visits, always aligned with private gatherings, always linked to restrictive agreements. He switched slides photos of 3 flights, Deck 11 2021, APOR 9 2022, and another unlisted trip, all featuring Ellen and Twitch. The flights coincide with the visits, he said. Controlled, secretive, and financialized. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Next, Kash called the forensic accountant. She reconstructed Twitch's cash flow, he explained. He received no irregular funds. His expenses were normal until these reimbursements. The accountant nodded. They match event dates exactly. Kash turned back to the jury. It wasn't a financial blessing. It was operational cover. In a sudden pivot, the door opened. A group of survivors entered, former dancers and assistants. They took seats in the gallery. Their recollection had been requested to testify in camera. One came forward, voice breaking, recorded on a loopback mic. "I was 19 when they told me, 'Smile for Ellen.' She hesitated. If I cried, I wasn't invited back." Another chimed in, "I saw him in tears after a party. He whispered, 'I can't do this.'" Their collective statement was short. This was systematic abuse. An associate producer handed evidence to the court clerk, stacks of NDA forms, naming conventions lists of invited talent, all referencing after-hours events. Kash faced the jury. These people came forward because they know what he couldn't say. He paused. This isn't merely about one man's death. It's about a culture of silence. The judge cleared his throat. Proceed. Next, a former PR executive from Ellen's team was called in secret. Her pre-recorded statement played. They had code names, stillness retreats, light shifts, mindful resets, but they were recruitment events. They selected based on emotional vulnerability. Her voice trembled. They isolated people under the guise of wellness. They coaxed trust and then exploited it. Even Ellen's counsel looked unsettled. Kash introduced internal emails, one comparing Twitch to rocketing commodity, another labeling emotional breakdowns as bad optics. On screen, a highlighted memo signed by Ellen's production head, "We need to manage him. If he flags, risk schedule a getaway, no exceptions." Kash addressed the court. They monitored his emotions, treated him like inventory. Suddenly, court officers intervened. A loudspeaker informed everyone that Ellen's attorney was requesting a sidebar. The courtroom buzzed. Outside in the halls, reporters updated live PR exec blows, lid on code word network. Back in court, the emergency sidebar granted Elias Ellen's lawyer 2 minutes to adjust. He returned to object. "These emails are hearsay." Kash replied, "They aren't hearsay. They are internal signed documents. They prove planning. Judge Trent ruled them admissible." A hush fell. Kash approached the jury one final time in this segment. Stephen Twitch's death was no accident. It was the tragic endpoint of a toxic ecosystem. He made eye contact with the juror's, voice steady. He fought. He tried to warn the world, but he couldn't fight alone. He gestured towards Allison and the survivors. These people now stand here to tell what they couldn't before. A soft sob echoed. The judge recessed again. Cameras flashed. Families wept openly. Outside, Cash spoke briefly to waiting reporters. Today we illuminated the shadows. Tomorrow we finish the truth. He walked away. The courtroom reconvened after a tense break. Judge Trent entered, first followed by Ashley and Allison on either side. The gallery was packed survivors, reporters, and industry figures, all waiting for the next bombshell. Cash Patel rose from his seat, composed and resolute. Your Honor, we continue with new evidence that illustrates how Ellen DeGeneres was not only complicit, but instrumental in fostering the environment that led to Stephen Twitch Boss's death. Cash nodded to the tech clerk, who cued a grainy, dimly lit video projection. The footage showed Slack-style snippets of a stillness retreat, a coded invitation that survivors had described as a recruitment event. Ellen, calm but serious, is seen guiding attendees into silent meditation. Her voice soft yet authoritative. Find your center. Trust the process. Several women entered a side room. The camera lingers on their faces, hesitant, searching. The scene shifts, the door closes, and muffled sobs echo in the hallway. Cash paused. This video wasn't intended for public viewing. It was used internally, part of the program. The courtroom was silent. Next, Cash presented a large folder: flight logs, hotel invoices, billing statements tying Ellen's entity to repeated high-cost stays in luxury suites adjacent to venues where Hulu-level events were held. Notice, he said, pointing to the screen, the reimbursement is labeled retreat lodging. The pattern is consistent flights, luxury rooms, limited phone use, and NDAs. Ellen's counsel rose quickly. Your Honor, these are event costs, Cash interjected, except they don't align with public events. These are private after-hours gatherings without public programming or press coverage. Judge Trent allowed the exhibit. Allison took the stand again, this time live. She held back tears. I watched my husband shrink under their pressure. I remember the day he told me, they want compliance. We saw the ledger they called that midnight fund, and I cried. The jurors listened rapt. I was told, you want a future, you follow the plan. Or else, she pointed at Ellen seated across the room. You warned me, back off or you'll lose everything, including the kids. A hush fell. Reporters scribbled. A rotating spotlight highlighted 3 survivors, each sharing a short but chilling account of coercion and emotional manipulation, looped with audio playback, a dancer's recording. They told us, quiet nourishes the soul, but noise ends careers. An assistant, I was told, to smile even when he cried, that silence proves your loyalty. A makeup artist, we had pay envelopes, cash only. Code words if we resisted. Cash summarized fellow victims right in, it's not a scene, it's an architecture. That is why they survived. Overnight they obeyed. Twitch didn't. Another exhibit played a private video from Ellen's hidden confession recorded 3 months ago. Her eyes were red, voice trembling. I thought I helped. I believed in joy, but I watched him fade. I lied to him. I silenced him. And when he died, I wanted it to be his choice because that felt safer. She paused, choked on tears. I was scared I'd lose everything, my career, my brand. But I lost him. The jurors shifted. For the first time, Ellen looked genuinely human. Elias rose, turning to the camera footage and evidence. These events were wellness retreats, organized to help Stephen. Ms. DeGeneres cared. She wasn't recruiting or coercing, she was supporting. Yes, the environment was secret for privacy. Yes, NDAs were signed to ensure confidentiality for a public figure, but nothing criminal happened here. He paused. Stephen's death remains tragic, but we have no proof of murder or coercion leading to death. Cash returned to the podium, unwavering. Your Honor, jurors, we don't need proof of murder. We have a pattern. We have coercion. And we have a man broken by emotional exhaustion. Suicide does not absolve conspiracy, culpability, or emotional abuse leading to death. We assert responsibility. Ms. DeGeneres had influence. She recruited. She enforced. She benefited. He gestured to the survivors. His whispers were drowned by her commands. His life drained by compliance. And only their voices can stand for him now. Ellen wept quietly. This wasn't business anymore. Elias called no further witnesses. Judge Trent stood. We will now proceed to closing arguments. But first, he ordered a minute of silence in memory of Stephen Twitch Boss, artist father, followed by a single bell. The rhythm pulsed through the courtroom like a heartbeat. As the jury departed to deliberate, the press scrum erupted. Cash spoke. We laid it bare. We honored Stephen. Now we ask for justice for survivors. We ask that institutional silence end. Fans outside memorialized him with candles and chants. He didn't give up. He spoke up. The jury retired to deliberate. Tension rippled through the courthouse corridors. Reporters whispered. Survivors clutched each other. Outside, candles flickered in vigil. Cash Patel stepped onto the courthouse steps, cameras rolling. His gaze was steady, voice firm. We requested truth. We honored a legacy. We demanded accountability, he declared. Today we question if silence can ever be murder. We stand with survivors. Stephen's story isn't hidden anymore. Flashbulbs popped. His words reverberated far beyond the judge's bench. Social media exploded with shrouded truth for Stephen. Inside the courthouse, Ellen curled into a chair in a private room. Her attorney, Elias, quietly laid out next steps. Prepare for settlement discussions. Jury may go either way, he murmured. Ellen stared at her hands, tears dragging through mascara. Public acclaim had morphed into public scrutiny. She realized the industry's embrace was gone. In that moment, she saw the cost of secrets and silence. Entertainment giants scrambled. Networks paused Ellen's daytime shows. Sponsors pulled ads related to any production she fronted. Streaming platforms paused reruns. A major network internal memo leaked. Trust is broken. Viewer backlash. Talent roster being reevaluated. Producers canceled upcoming projects. Agents distanced themselves. Talent agencies issued statements about zero tolerance. Survivors emerged publicly supported by legal counsel and crisis teams. They held a press call on courthouse steps. One dancer, Sarah, 35, spoke, I stayed quiet to protect my career. Now I'm here to protect my truth. A choreographer, Lily, 29, added, No more power and silence, not on my watch. Their coordinated call for industry reform went viral. The hashtag #IRBreakTheSilence trended. The jury returned after 5 days. Court reconvened. Judge Trent asked, Have you reached a verdict? The jury, 4-person, rose, voice steady. We find Ellen DeGeneres guilty of conspiracy to conceal wrongdoing and emotional coercion contributing to the death of Stephen Twitch Boss. A collective intake of breath filled the court. The verdict wasn't homicide, it was the acknowledgement that abuse and silence can kill too. Legal precedent shifted. Sentencing was scheduled. News outlets speculated prison time. Probation, mandatory public service. Ellen faced up to 10 years. Defense sought leniency, citing mental health support and public remorse. Prosecution demanded accountability. Survivors submitted victim statements. One read, Stephen's death was not on him alone. Silence echoed louder than pain. This verdict begins to dismantle that silence. Networks pledged sweeping changes. A major studio introduced a standard consent protocol requiring anti-coercion clauses and safe exit policies. Talent agencies adopted transparency and whistleblower protections. A new consortium, Artists Integrity Council, formed to support survivors. Late-night hosts dissected the verdict. One commented, Power in Hollywood isn't always on screen, it's backstage behind closed doors. Columnists mused, if silence killed Stephen, this verdict hits the pause button on an entire system. Social media raged. Gen Z creators began live streams urging standing up to industry manipulation. A week later, Ellen gave her first on-camera statement. No studio backdrop, bare wall, Direct eye contact. "I'm deeply sorry to Stephen's family," she said, voice subdued. "I never meant to harm. I thought I was protecting everyone. That was wrong." She pledged community service funding, support systems, counseling for survivors, and a public series on abuse in entertainment. Some embraced it as genuine remorse. Others remained skeptical, citing past incongruities. On the day of sentencing, a memorial event took place on the courthouse lawn. Candles lined walkways, photos of Stephen danced on banners. His children, Wesley 16, Maddox 8, Zaya 5, stood with Allison. Their presence brought the story full circle. A mural was unveiled portraying Stephen mid-dance. Beneath a banner read, "Let truth be ugly." Allison spoke. "He wasn't just an artist. He was a son, a father, a voice for those who couldn't speak." She paused. We finally listened. Entertainment contracts were rewritten. NDAs requiring silence during legal proceedings were banned. New laws were introduced in California, forced NDA transparency audience, reporting mechanisms, and mandatory legal counsel for vulnerable staff. Film schools introduced ethics modules. Journalism departments taught on covert power dynamics. Cash returned to Washington briefing lawmakers on institutional power abuse. He proposed federal oversight and transparency protections in entertainment industries. He reminded lawmakers silence without scrutiny can be fatal. Accountability isn't political, it's human. Months later, TikTokers and influencers began sharing real stories of coercion. Podcasts revived forgotten survivors. Documentaries commissioned with full survivor control. Ellen's redemption arc continued, albeit shaded with controversy. Some welcomed it. Others placed it on trial anew. Meanwhile, the Artists' Integrity Council's helpline received thousands of calls. Studios began tracking staff mental health as industry standard. Stephen's children launched the Twitch Foundation, focused on arts, mental health, and speaking out. The air in the courthouse felt heavier as Ellen DeGeneres stood before Judge Trent. The room was packed, buzzing with expectation. Members of the media sat poised, cameras ready, as the long-awaited sentencing was about to unfold. The courtroom had already witnessed seismic shifts in the cultural landscape, but today the conclusion of this trial promised to bring it all together. Judge Harrison Trent looked up at Ellen, who stood motionless before him. Her eyes, once a familiar source of comfort and laughter for millions, were now filled with apprehension. The courtroom was silent, save for the rustling of papers and the shuffle of feet. "Ms. DeGeneres, please stand," the judge commanded. Ellen rose slowly, her demeanor somber, no longer the confident entertainer, but a woman at the mercy of the system she had once dominated. After considering all the evidence, including the testimony of Stephen Twitch Boss's family, and the undeniable role you played in concealing the circumstances surrounding his tragic death, I hereby sentence you to 2 years of incarceration, Judge Trent continued. Gasps filled the courtroom. Many had expected some form of leniency, a token sentence given her status, but this was different. There would be no reprieve. Her conviction for conspiracy to conceal wrongdoing and emotional coercion that directly contributed to Twitch's death had sealed her fate. While Ellen stood still, absorbing the weight of the sentence, the world outside the courtroom exploded. Social media erupted, some in support, others in furious opposition. Celebrities, influencers, and survivors who had rallied behind the truth of Twitch's death voiced their opinions on platforms across the globe. In a surprising move, some former collaborators of Ellen, including comedians and industry professionals who had once been part of her inner circle, took to Twitter to express mixed feelings. Comedian John Mulaney tweeted, "Truth will always out, no matter how much power is behind the lie. The system may break, but it's never too late for the truth to rebuild it." Meanwhile, others like Sarah Silverman, long a supporter of Ellen's career, took a more cautious stance. "Nothing about this is easy. Justice is a hard road for everyone involved. I don't know how this will unfold, but I hope it leads to true change." The public was split. Survivors applauded the verdict, seeing it as a sign that silence no longer ruled. while detractors decried the trial as a personal vendetta against a woman who had given so much to the entertainment industry. After the sentencing, Ellen was escorted from the courthouse by her legal team. She did not speak to the press, but made a public statement later that evening. In a low-key video posted on her social media platforms, she said, "I'm not here to apologize for the system that failed so many. I have been part of that system, but I am here now to try to undo the damage I've done. I can't bring back Stephen or undo my role in his life, but I can try to make amends for the future. I won't be silent anymore." Though her words were measured, they could not erase the deep scars she had left behind. Critics still had their doubts about whether she was truly remorseful or merely trying to save her own skin. In contrast, survivors, particularly those in the entertainment industry who had been silenced for years, praised Ellen's statements as a form of accountability. Twitch's widow, Allison Holker, released a statement that read, "Justice is not a quick fix. It's not about punishing Ellen. It's about honoring Stephen's legacy, and the truth is the beginning of that honor. We have a long way to go, but this moment is a crucial step toward healing." The cultural and legal implications of Ellen's conviction were far-reaching. Across the country, the entertainment industry began to see significant changes. In Hollywood, a new wave of activism swept through. The Break the Silence movement grew into a national conversation about power dynamics, forced silence, and the exploitation that often existed behind closed doors. One of the first major responses was from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which issued a statement condemning the culture of secrecy and manipulation that had become ingrained in Hollywood. They announced an initiative to provide counseling, legal protection, and career support for those who had experienced coercion or abuse in the industry. Furthermore, the launch of the Artists' Integrity Council marked a pivotal shift. This organization, created with the support of survivors, advocates, and former industry professionals, focused on dismantling the systems of power that had been abused for decades. They worked with Congress to propose legislation that would prohibit NDAs that covered up criminal behavior and abuse, advocating for survivors to be able to speak out without fear of professional retribution. The survivors who had once been silent now took center stage, leading the charge in pushing for change. Twitch's legacy continued to inspire, but the survivors' voices who had once feared losing their careers or credibility now became the symbol of a new industry. Sarah, 35, one of the former dancers who had testified, said in a post on her blog, "I once hid my story to protect my career, but now it's my voice that I protect. I am not ashamed of what happened to me. I'm proud to be part of the generation that will make sure this never happens again." The Twitch Foundation, established by Allison and their children, focused on supporting survivors and providing resources for those still trapped in the system. They raised millions, with donations flooding in from all over the world. Twitch's memory was kept alive, not just through remembrance, but through action and reform. At the state level, California passed sweeping legislation that overhauled workplace protections in entertainment. New laws prohibited forced NDAs in any situation involving coercion or abuse, and created a state-run hotline for employees to report concerns. Federal agencies also started their investigations into the broader practices of Hollywood. The Justice Department opened a probe into whether entertainment companies had been complicit in these practices, especially concerning their handling of contracts and the protection of power structures that had enabled this kind of exploitation. As the trial moved forward, Diddy's testimony came as the final bombshell. For the first time, the notorious entertainment mogul stepped into the courtroom and faced the music. His statement was chilling in its honesty and frightening in its revelations. "There's a system. It's not an accident. We don't just stumble into power." Diddy admitted, his voice steady but cold. "I didn't build an empire, I built a trap, and too many walked right into it." His words sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Those who had long whispered about his methods now knew the truth. The entire entertainment industry had been complicit in a system that manipulated and abused its most vulnerable. Diddy didn't shy away from naming names. He detailed the complex web of manipulation, deceit, and coercion. Some he claimed had been aware and chose to remain silent. Others, like Ellen, had actively participated. As the legal proceedings came to a close, the entertainment industry saw a shifting of power. Studios and talent agencies were forced to acknowledge the cracks in their systems. High-profile executives who had turned a blind eye to the abuses were ousted. The Artists' Integrity Council was now working directly with lawmakers to ensure that no more careers would be destroyed by the ruthless clandestine practices that had once governed Hollywood. The conversation had fundamentally changed, not just about Hollywood, but about power dynamics across all industries. Ellen's public appearance following her sentencing took place on a quiet evening in the heart of Los Angeles. She addressed a gathering of victim supporters and journalists. For the first time, she acknowledged her involvement in the system and the destruction it had caused. Her voice was no longer the beacon of joy it once was, but in its place, there was something more real, something more human. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I am sorry for the lies, for the silence, and for the pain I caused. I will never undo my mistakes, but I will try to make this right." The last scene in the courtroom was not of judgment, but of reflection. Survivors stood hands held as the court adjourned. They were the new face of justice, the new voice of power, and the world would listen.